Halloween was supposed to be ordinary this year. That's what I kept saying to myself as I loaded the trunk with cheap decorations and the kind of booze you only bring out for parties, not because you love it, but because you love the memories you hope it creates. My name is Michael Travers, and this is the record of how I lost everything on a night when the world was supposed to be wearing masks, but only one of them was real. It started as a simple getaway. Me and my wife, Leanne. 19 years together, 8 Halloweens celebrated with friends, but this year we wanted something quiet. Something just for us. A cabin we found on short notice, set deep in Woodpine Valley, a place famous for its autumn colors, and some said, stories best left untold. Leanne was excited. She loved the way the leaves turned gold and red, how the forest looked like it was on fire in the twilight. As we drove deeper into the woods that afternoon, October 31st, she leaned her head against the window, humming to herself. I kept glancing at her, the way she smiled when she caught me looking, the way her eyes sparkled when she pointed out a pair of deer slipping through the trees. I felt lucky. I felt safe. The cabin was old. Its wood groaned beneath our feet, and there was a layer of dust on every surface that told me no one had lived there in months, maybe longer. We unpacked, lit too many candles, opened wine, laughed at silly horror movies on a battered old DVD player. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees like distant laughter. At midnight, with the whole world bathed in shadow, we put on our hastily assembled costumes. Leanne is a witch, me as something halfway between a pirate and a convict. We headed outside to take pictures, but the flashlight immediately flickered and died. Leanne teased me, saying maybe it was a sign we'd worn out our welcome. Halloween is for ghosts, Mike, she laughed, not amateurs. I still see her face in that moment, bright, mischievous, full of warmth. I wish I could tell you it lasted. I wish I could lie. Within minutes, everything changed. From the forest's edge, an inhuman screech echoed, cutting through our laughter. Leanne's grip tightened around my arm, her nails digging in. Then the wind shifted, carrying with it a cold so deep it felt as though it wasn't just pressing against our skin, but reaching inside our bones. We should have gone back inside, locked the doors, called for help. But something, curiosity, bravado, maybe something darker, drove us into those woods. If you're reading this, if you find any trace of what happened next, remember, some masks aren't for Halloween. Some masks are forever. I used to joke that I only got brave after midnight. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was Leanne's smile. Maybe it was the sense of childish invulnerability that comes with dressing up like a fool in October. The feeling that the bad things only happen to other people. But when that sound split the night, when Leanne stopped laughing, and I saw a kind of ancient fear flicker across her face, I realized something sharp and new. Bravery is not the absence of fear, but knowing you're going anyway. The woods behind the cabin were thick, tangled, alive with the whisper of things best unspoken. The leaves crunched under our shoes, more brittle than I'd expected. The flashlight sputtered, casting weak shadows that seemed to move even when we stood still. Every step, I told myself this was just another silly story for the campfire. Another, remember when we tried to hunt ghosts? Anecdote. But then there was the mask. Hung from a low branch, half hidden by leaves, it was unlike any Halloween mask I'd ever seen. Not plastic, not rubber, but old, bone white, painted with spirals in a bruised blue, its eye holes too wide, its mouth twisted into a grin so sharp it could cut. Someone was playing a prank, I thought. Maybe kids, maybe some old hunter with sick sense of humor. I reached for it, and Leanne hissed, "Don't." Her voice was a whisper, yet the whole forest seemed to take notice. We backed away. The wind howled, carrying brittle laughter. Or was it just branches scraping together? Every rational part of me whispered to go back. to forget this, but all those little irrational parts were louder. What harm in seeing who left it? It's cliché, but I swear, time started to run differently in those woods. Our phones had no signal. My watch ticked, but the hand stayed in place. Sounds arrived out of order. Leaves fell upward, or the cold made patterns in the mist I could have sworn shaped words. Leanne squeezed my hand. Let's go back, Mike, please. That please did something inside me, made all the childish braggadocio shrivel. Okay, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Let's just leave it. We turned, but the path was gone. Not just hard to see. Gone. The trees seemed to have crowded closer together, branches woven like the bars of a cage. I kept trying to retrace our steps, but every reference, every familiar marker from the walk down was missing. I wanted to laugh, tell Leanne this was just our nerves, that we'd find our way if we stayed calm. But Leanne wasn't calm. She started breathing faster, wringing her hands until her costume fell apart. Mike, it's not funny, she snapped, her voice brittle. It's like something is watching. The forest, I said, trying to tease, but the joke fell flat. There was a new smell on the breeze, something coppery, ancient, like rust or old blood in the hollow of a tree. We wandered for what felt like hours, occasionally seeing flickers of light darting between the trunks, flickers that never materialized, yet always seemed to be just behind us. I tried using my phone's flashlight. It lasted 2 minutes before dying and refusing to revive. Leanne checked hers and frowned. Batteries at 90%. And it's dead? That's when we heard voices. Thin, ethereal, hovering just above the normal range of hearing. Not words, exactly, but suggestions of words, as if someone were trying to talk with a mouth full of water. Leanne stopped. Did you hear that? She asked, clutching my arm. I nodded. We both stood frozen as a figure emerged from the darkness. It walked awkwardly, almost puppet-like, and wore a mask identical to the one we'd seen on the branch, bone-white, twisted, with spirals. I tried to call out, but my throat locked. The figure stopped and tilted its head, sizing us up. Then, without a sound, it turned and vanished into the gloom. The whispers grew louder. We moved again, hurry turning to panic, Leanne nearly tripping as she clung to me. The forest erupted with movement. Masked figures slipping between trees, never letting us get a clear look. Yet every time we blinked, one seemed closer than before. They weren't solid, not exactly. Some blurred at the edges, others flickered in and out like bad reception on an old television. I wondered, madly, if we'd crashed the world's strangest costume party. Suddenly, a clearing opened ahead. We stumbled in, breathless, surrounded by ancient oaks and a ring of black stones arranged like teeth. In the center lay what looked like an altar, covered with masks. Dozens, each face more deformed than the last, spirals painted in blue and crimson, some broken, some fresh. Leanne whimpered, hugging herself. Mike, I don't want to be here. I agreed. But as we tried to leave, shapes blocked the exits, not moving, just appearing, like chess pieces set where they needed to be. The temperature plunged. The ground beneath our feet pulsed. I swear it pulsed, not shook. The masks began to glow, lines crawling like electric veins, and from somewhere far behind me, I heard a child's laughter echoing. Leanne collapsed, sobbing. I dropped to my knees, desperate, and reached out, grabbing the least broken mask from the altar. The world warped. Colors scattered, light bled from the edges of my vision, and every sound became a wail. I felt as though I were both standing in the woods and falling through endless cold water. Then, silence. All the masked figures had vanished. The forest returned, normal and quiet and impossibly still. I blinked, my head pounding, my grip still crushing the mask. Leanne huddled next to me, her eyes wide and unseeing, her breath shallow. I wanted to believe we were safe. I wanted to believe it was all a hallucination brought on by panic. But as we stumbled back through the woods, using the mask like a beacon, retracing paths as they revealed themselves only after I held it high, I realized two things. First, the mask was warm, pulsing in time with my heartbeat, almost alive. Second, and far worse, we were being followed. Every time I turned, I saw a shadow, a hint of white bone in blue spiral, lingering beyond the reach of our borrowed light. Some secrets, the forest seemed to say, aren't meant for Halloween. Some rituals don't end because morning comes. And somewhere, just beyond what my eyes could see, laughter echoed, waiting for us to drop our guard. Have you ever tried to outrun something you couldn't see, only sense? That's what those next minutes, maybe hours, felt like. The woods weren't just dark. They were layered. Darkness inside darkness, and somewhere between those layers, something watched, clever and patient. Leanne kept whispering my name. More than once, I stopped walking just to listen, terrified that if I let her slip behind me, even a few feet, she'd vanish like a snuffed candle. The trees closed in with every turn. My hands shook. Sweat beaded on my neck, despite the chill. The mask in my hand pulsed now, maybe with my panic, maybe with its own heartbeat. Once I tripped, dropping it on curled brown leaves. Instantly, the forest's noises sharpened. 1,000 tiny feet skittering, wind howling through branches, shapes darting between trunks. I lunged to recover it, and only when my fingers closed around the bone-cold surface did the woods fall silent again. The mask was some kind of key, or maybe a pass, and I clung to it with desperation bordering on madness. As we stumbled, a thin, chill fog curled across the ground, swirling around our ankles. Strange, twisted shadows stretched beneath us, shadows that sometimes moved when we stood still. I tried to think of rational explanations, mentally cataloging everything. Ground inversion, reflected streetlights, the after-effects of stress. But the truth was simpler. We were not alone. Leanne pulled me closer. "Don't let them separate us," she pleaded, her voice so small and raw it hurt. "Promise." "I promise," I said, but I wasn't sure I could keep it. We followed the mask's pull, moving wherever the air felt less heavy. Sometimes we recrossed our own tracks, recognizing a fallen birch, a patch of mushrooms, even the shattered handle of my flashlight. Either we were walking in circles, or the forest was folding us in upon ourselves. Time lost meaning. My thoughts unraveled. I remembered old stories my grandmother used to tell about the wild hunt, a ghostly procession that snatches travelers on stormy nights. I never believed her as a boy. Now, with every crunch of leaves and flicker of shadow, I wondered if some part of those old tales was true, just disguised, waiting for a night like this. Suddenly, a light flickered ahead, orange and uncomfortably organic, like fire inside rotten fruit. A clearing. At the center, a bonfire burned, its flame almost silent, too still. Around it, masked figures in tattered garments stood perfectly motionless. Leanne clutched my arm. "Mike, she choked on her words, staring at a solitary figure at the edge of the firelight. It wore a mask like ours, but crowned with moth wings and deer antlers, the spirals painted deep red instead of blue. The figures parted for us, almost respectfully. I didn't want to enter, but something irresistible tugged me forward, fear and curiosity, entangled until I couldn't tell which was stronger. Just as we crossed the threshold, the nearest masked figure raised its hand, palm outward. It pressed something into mine, a small, smooth stone with a spiral carved deep into it. The exact design from every mask. My mind flashed back to the altar and the ring of stones. The fire's light swelled, flattening color and sound. My breath rasped in my ears. The moth-crowned figure pointed at the sky, and every masked face followed, including Leanne beside me. I resisted until I couldn't. Overhead, the branches twisted to form a perfect circle, through which I saw not stars, but a shifting abyss, silver and black, swirling, bottomless. Then a low chant threaded the silence, a rhythm older than language, making my skin crawl. The forest pulsed with it, the ground shivering in time. The world shrank to the fire, the stone in my palm, and the terror in Leanne's eyes. "Mike, do you see it?" she murmured, trance-like, her voice at once hers and not hers. "I see it," I whispered back, though my mind screamed not to look. The sky above the circle rippled as if a great eye vast, lidless examined us, weighing us like moths pinned for study. Every secret, every memory, every lie I'd ever told seemed to hang exposed in that gaze. Suddenly the world snapped back, the fire guttered. The masked crowd melted into fog. The clearing emptied, except for Leanne, shuddering in cold, and me, still clutching the spiraled stone. When I turned to her, she was staring at me, not with fear, but with something deeper, almost haunted. "Did you make a wish, Mike?" I shook my head, lost. She laughed thinly, not herself. "I think someone did." All I felt was the mask's pulse slowing in my palm, and the certainty that whatever ritual we'd interrupted hadn't ended. Instead, it had just begun. We moved through the woods as dawn crept closer, though the light did nothing to dilute the oppressive darkness pooling under branches. The spiral stone throbbed in my palm, guiding my steps, or perhaps luring me deeper. At times it felt impossible to tell the difference. Leanne became quieter, her words clipped and cautious. "Mike, what if the masks aren't just decoration?" She stared into the fog with haunted eyes. "What if they're more like warnings?" I wanted to reassure her, but my voice faltered. Logic, my old friend, had abandoned me somewhere near the altar. I kept thinking about all the stories I'd ever dismissed as nonsense. Phantom lights on old railroad tracks, disappearances without motive or clue, those weird newspaper clippings about hikers found miles from camp with their shoes neatly placed beside them. We pressed forward in silence, navigating tangles of brush and clawing brambles. I could still sense the presence behind us. Masked figures, not human, not quite shadow, trailing at a distance. Each time I looked back, the spiral stone pulsed faster, as if sending some kind of warning or invitation. Twice we passed clearings we'd already traversed. The woods folded in on themselves, breaking laws of distance and reason. Leanne glanced at her watch. It was 3 a.m. an hour ago. And now it's midnight again. Her voice broke on the word. A sudden rustling made us freeze. For a moment, I saw movement at the edge of vision. Not an animal, not wind, but something deliberate. I squeezed Leanne's hand until my knuckles whitened. We stumbled upon a cottage, ramshackle and out of place, its door hanging from crooked hinges. The windows stared back, black and empty. We debated entering, but the forest didn't offer many choices. Inside, a strange tableau awaited. Costumes hung on pegs, masks carved into the wood itself, and a table set as if for two, plates rimmed with blue spirals, cold wax pooled around burned-out candles. Leanne moved toward the mantel, fingers trembling. There, in a cracked frame, an old photo showed two figures in masks, standing where we stood. Their eyes visible through the eye holes seemed glassy, empty, yet familiar. The room's temperature dropped further. The forest pressed against the thin walls, as if hungry to reclaim the space. Suddenly, the cottage's door slammed shut. I rushed forward, wrestling with the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Leanne's breath grew short, panic mounting. She clung to my arm as whispers filled the room, voices echoing from every crack and crevice. We turned. The costumes began to ripple, fabrics stretching and twisting on their own, as if invisible bodies were lining up for a pageant. Masks clattered to the floor, and rolled toward us, settling by our feet. The spiral seemed alive now, glowing faintly and crawling along the surface like silver snails. From the shadows, a masked figure emerged, moth wings outspread, antlers scraping the ceiling. It didn't walk. It glided, like wind disturbing heavy curtains. I willed myself to speak, but my tongue glued to the roof of my mouth. Leanne clung to me. "Whatever happens, don't let go." "I won't," I lied. The figure stopped inches away. It bowed its head, then pointed to the table, signaling for us to sit. The moment my hand touched the chair, a surge of ice shot up my arm, and time fractured. I saw flashes Leanne as a little girl at Halloween, myself building forts in autumn forests, both of us separate and together, echoing through layers of memory I'd never lived. The masked figure leaned in, voice a shiver. "Are you guests or are you hosts?" I stared in confusion. "It's almost morning," Leanne whispered, her eyes wet and desperate. "What happens when Halloween ends?" The answer crawled along my bones, something ancient, not a question but a warning. Not every costume comes off at sunrise. Not every mask is a disguise. The spiral stone pulsed a final time, and all sensation dropped away. I felt myself split in two, one version rooted in the chair, one drifting through woodland mist, searching, forever searching for a way home. When I blinked, the cottage had emptied. The masks had vanished. The forest pressed close again, heavy and watchful. Something or someone followed us as we left, as if deciding whether we were guests. Or something new, something meant to stay forever. Outside, the woods wore a new face. The fog thickened, scattering the weak dawn and painting everything in shades of gray-green dread. Each breath felt heavier. I squeezed Leanne's hand, needing proof she was still there, still real. She looked at me, haunted, shaky, but anchored. We walked, directionless, every instinct screaming that the forest was different now. It no longer merely watched. It beckoned. Not a warning, but an invitation, and the air buzzed with expectation. The spiral stone in my pocket had grown cool, its surface throbbing in sync with my heartbeat, reminding me that it still belonged to the night. We stumbled upon markers we didn't recall, ragged ribbons tangled in branches, a child's shoe dusted with mud, crude lanterns carved from turnips, their grins rotted in the mist. A soft thumping echoed ahead, the hollow, irregular rhythm of a drum, and with it came a strange sense of inevitability. Halloween was over, but the land had not released us. Suddenly, Leanne stopped short. Through a break in the brambles, we glimpsed the clearing with the ring of stones from before. The bonfire had dwindled to embers, biting against the damp air. But around it, the masked figures had gathered again, motionless as tombstones, more now than before, and all of them turned toward us as if expecting an answer. "We can't go back," Leanne whispered. "Whatever game this is, we're already in it." The leader, the moth-crowned, antlered figure, stepped forward, still gliding, still weightless. This time when it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through flesh and bone. "You took the mask, witnessed the circle, sat at the table. Now choose." The crowd parted. Two paths revealed themselves. One narrow, sunlit, and oddly welcoming, the other a winding black tunnel between gnarled roots, choked with shadow. My muscles locked like a marionette waiting for a tug. Leanne gripped my arm. No matter what, we go together. But already I sensed the pull, the forest's ancient gravity, trying to separate us. The leader extended two masks, one blue, swirling with wave-like spirals, one deep crimson, its spiral more like a snare. "Choose." The word vibrated behind my eyes. My mind splintered. Memories flooded in. Halloween nights as a child, games of hide-and-seek, the shape of fear in the dark, and wove with them images that weren't mine. Ancient celebrations, Masks raised against bonfires. Strangers made kin, then vanished before dawn. The crowd's whispers rose. Masks are more than faces. Will you forget, or will you remember? Leanne reached for a mask, the blue one. I barely managed to speak. Wait. We should. The world flexed. My mind snapped to somewhere else, standing beside her, now alone. The moth-crowned leader nodded and vanished, masks collapsing to dust. In my hand, I found only the spiral stone, now cold as ice. I screamed her name, then mine, then both. The woods swallowed every sound. Suddenly, the clearing emptied. The masked congregation had dissolved, the bonfire gone. I stood in the silent woods, in a circle of upturned stones, with nothing but the stone, and my memory of Leanne's last look. Desperate, I wandered, retracing every path, every break in the branches that might lead back. But each route looped me to the start. At times, I thought I saw Leanne's shadow flitting through the trees, her laughter behind me. But every time I turned, only wind and echo remained. It wasn't until I found myself hours later, back before the same ruined cottage, that I understood. The forest didn't want us gone. It wanted us changed. Inside the cottage, dust flecked the pale light. There was one mask left, propped on the windowsill. I took it in both hands, and at once saw a flicker. Leanne's reflection, smiling, then wide-eyed, then gone. A choice. Had she passed her test, or had I failed mine? I slumped against the door and wept, not knowing what world I'd return to if I ever escaped, or if the mask in my hand was truly empty. I spent what felt like years in that ruined cottage, but the pale sun outside hadn't moved an inch. At first, I called Leanne's name as if my voice could anchor her to this world, whispering, then shouting, pleading until my throat was raw. There was no reply, not even echo. No living bird sang. The silences were too absolute. After a time, when the walls felt like they might close in, I forced myself out and back into the forest. Everywhere, the fog hung in shreds, parting reluctantly before me. The air vibrated with the memory of ritual, as if invisible threads kept tugging at my arms and ankles. The spiral stone, back in my pocket, pulsed once and grew heavy, so cold it felt cut from ice. It wanted something, or was waiting for me to want something badly enough to bargain. I wandered, directionless. In every glade, every hollow, I caught glimpses. A mask rustling in the undergrowth, a hand beckoning from behind a tree, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Sometimes I even thought I heard two voices, both mine and Leanne's, overlapping, one hopeful, one hollowed out. I began to wonder, was I moving through the woods, or had the woods begun to move around me? At some point, I circled back to the clearing. The stone ring was larger now, more stones than before, as though the forest itself had conscripted new sentinels. At their base, I noticed scattered objects, lost things, offered things. A torn photograph, a young couple in Halloween face paint, a broken watch, a blue ribbon like one Leanne had tied in her hair years back. The weight of memory nearly broke me. The spiral stone vibrated furiously in my palm, then warmed. I knelt by the altar, numb, and felt the world compress, the woods, the sky, all reduced to the cold logic of choice. I pressed the stone against the centerpiece and waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a sound, the ache of old wood, drifted through the trees, and with it, shadows emerged. Dozens of masked figures, silent as snowfall, encircled me. They regarded me not with malice, but with the weight of ritual. I stood and faced the tallest among them, the antlered, moth-crowned being that had led the ceremonies before. Its eyes locked to mine through the holes of that inhuman mask. "You have wandered," it intoned, "and you have remembered. Not all do. What are you?" My voice cracked, all bravado gone. "We are memory and forgetting. Guest and host, promise and debt. You borrowed this night. Now pay its price. Choose what you keep her or yourself. Horror clawed at me. Choose? I can't. The moth-crowned figure stepped closer. Some forget and are lost. Some remember and remain. Only a few return, changed. What will you be? I fumbled for an answer, but none came. Memories of Leanne flickered and dimmed, competing with images not my own other guests, other nights, all fallen prey to this ancient cycle. Wind screeched through the trees. The figures began a slow, circling dance, chanting words I could almost understand. The stone in my hand throbbed red-hot. Decide, the being whispered, as the spiral burned against my palm, before morning chooses for you. Visions assaulted me 100 Halloweens, masks upon masks, couples vanishing down woodland trails, legends morphing into warnings that nobody truly heard. My mind splintered again, and I was facing Leanne, her eyes hollow with terror, pleading silently from beyond a veil. If I remembered her, I might never leave. If I let go, I could return alone, scarred, perhaps alive, but always haunted. The sky above the clearing shimmered. Dawn at last bleeding through the haunted black, though. It felt colder, emptier than any night before. I looked at the stone, at the leader, then screamed Leanne's name with everything left in me. The masked circle broke. The wind died. The ritual stilled. I fell, breathless, into silent darkness. I dreamed I was neither alive nor dead. The woods ran together, colors bleeding, sounds echoing as if through water. There was no up or down, only the dizzying spiral of memory and forgetting. Every choice, every echo of Leanne's voice seemed a thread winding tighter, drawing me toward something ancient and patient at the heart of the forest. As consciousness returned, I found myself in a place both familiar and wrong, a version of the clearing where the stone ring glimmered under a violet twilight. At its center sat a tall chair of twisted oak, and beside it the moth-crowned figure waited, mask aglow with pale blue fire. I was empty, hollowed out, but driven by one thing, the hope that Leanne might yet be found, rescued, remembered. You pleaded for memory, the leader said, its words rattling in the air, and so you remain here, neither host nor guest, but the bridge between stories. Do you wish to see her, or see yourself? I staggered forward, hands out, pleading, let her go. Take me instead. Take my name, my memories, just leave her free. The forest answered not with yes or no, but with a swell of wind and flickering shadows. Masks floated about me like leaves. I saw Leanne in each one, celebrating, crying, staring through me as if through glass, every mask a moment in time. Each time I reached, she vanished, replaced by another fragment: childhood joy, teenage heartbreak, adult regret. The moth-crowned leader lifted its mask. Beneath, its face was blank and smooth, etched with spirals that swam and shimmered as I watched, threatening to pull me under. What are you without your story? It whispered. Suddenly, I was somewhere else. A party years ago, laughter echoing off suburban walls. The night I proposed, trembling with anxious hope. Halloween dances, bright and simple, before the spiral had begun. I clung to these memories, my anchor. But the clearing twisted. Stones shifted, closing around me. The spiral stone burned in my grip, and the leader's voice thundered, all who forget are devoured. All who remember remain. But those who offer true love to the woods may bargain for return. Will you pay that price? What do you want? I managed, pulse hammering in my ears. A name, an honest memory. The truth you fear most. The clearing stilled. I thought of every secret I'd kept from Leanne, every resentment, every careless word. If you speak it, the leader intoned, the spiral may uncoil. If you lie, both of you are lost. Desperate, I kneeled. The mask in my hand grew heavy, bone and stone and grief. I forced my voice steady and spoke. That Halloween night, before the woods swallowed us, I confessed, I wished for escape. Not from you, but from myself, my doubts, the ways I feared growing old and ordinary. I wanted something to break the cycle. I'm sorry, Leanne. I never meant. The wind screamed. Masks burst into showers of blue sparks. The spiral stone flashed white-hot, and my head filled with pain and relief. The forest felt me, knew me, judged me. Then, quiet. The moth-crowned figure faded, leaving behind a single mask. Through its eye-holes appeared Leanne, distant but alive, calling my name. For a heartbeat, I ran, arms outstretched, and the mask fell away. I caught her, solid and shaking, her eyes wide with terror and love. We clung together as the spiral stone cooled, its pulse gentle now. Around us, the forest seemed to sigh, releasing us. You chose, whispered the wind. You spoke truth. Now return. Suddenly, the mist thinned. The stones parted, forming a path away from the nightmare, toward light and safety. We staggered, still afraid, but determined to reach the world beyond, no matter how changed we were. As the edge of the woods approached, I glanced back. Masks hung from branches, watching silently. A promise and a warning. The spiral never truly ends. We stumbled out of the forest like ghosts returning from the other side. The sky was bleeding dawn, pale and uncertain. I held the spiral stone tightly, but its pulse slowed until it was nothing more than a cold, inert weight. Leanne was beside me, real and trembling, her eyes wide with all the terror and relief of survival. We had crossed the boundary, the thin line between this world and the wood's endless night, but we were not the same. The forest lay behind us, silent as a grave. It had given us a chance, but at a cost none could understand. I looked around at the familiar landscape, the fading mist blending with the first light, and knew this was only the beginning of our story. Days turned into weeks. Friends asked where we had been. Police questioned our disappearance and sudden return. I told them a story laced with the mundane. A car broke down, cell signal lost, panic and confusion. But the truth was something darker, something unfinished. At night, I still feel the weight of the mask, the pull of the spiral stone tucked away in my drawer, untouched but never far from thought. Sometimes in the silence before sleep, I hear that low breath of the forest, the echo of the moth-crowned figure's voice. You are the bridge. Remember, Leanne and I have changed. The easy laughter from years past has been replaced by knowing glances and quiet understanding. We survive in the daylight, but we live in the spaces between, in memory and shadow. I have learned that some nights come with choices that echo forever, between holding on and letting go, between remembering and forgetting. And sometimes the masks we wear are not meant to hide ourselves, but to protect us from what we might become without them. If you find a spiral carved in bark, or see a flicker of wings in the periphery, remember, some doors open only once, and some masks are never meant to be removed. Halloween is not just a night of costumes and candy. It is a night when the veil is thin, when the forest listens, and when the past reaches out to the present with cold, twisted hands. This is our story. I am Michael Travers. We went into those woods as ourselves. We came out changed, bound forever to something old and restless. If you ever hear my voice in the wind, or see the glint of a spiral in the moonlight, know this: we remember, and we wait